The next story is about a lady called Mandy. A pretty hot vixen, if you ask me. He reaches up my shirt as I turn the key in the lock. His breath is hot on my neck as he alternates kissing and whispering the things he's going to do to me. I just roll my eyes. I open the door and he stumbles in behind me. He looks around my scantily decorated apartment. You're one of those minimalists, aren't you? Yes, I guess you could say that, I say as I tie my hair up. Well, Mandy, I think that's fracking cool, he says, before he pushes me up against the wall and shoves his tongue down my throat. I practically gag from the taste of real tequila. I grab his hand and lead him to the bedroom, where he flops on top of me on the bed. He pulls my skirt up and goes to work. Good, this will be over soon. After doing this for a few years, I can appreciate a man who gets straight to the point. After a few minutes of gyrating and moaning Mandy, he's finished. He rolls over beside me and sighs. I lay silently. Mandy, that was amazing. You are amazing. Like, you're a knockout. I roll onto my side and prop my head up on my hand as he continues. I saw you across the bar and saw how hot you were, but you've got hardcore RBF. I never thought you'd be freaky enough to just bring some rondo home with you. He laughs and I smirk. Little does he know. He wraps an arm around me. Is Mandy short for Amanda? He asks. No, it's actually Manny, not Mandy. Shit. I'm glad I didn't know. I don't know if I could be yelling out a dude's name when I'm doing it, you know. He laughs out. I roll my eyes again. It's actually a family name. It's short for Mantis. That's weird, but also cool, I guess. So Manny, are you satisfied? No, I say as I lean into him, my lips practically grazing his. But I will be. He shivers and I unhinge my jaw. My mouth clamps down over his head. I'm too fast for him to even fight it. I bite down, crushing his skull. I feel a crunch, then burst of blood. I savor gelatinous pieces of his brain. When I'm finished, I take a corner of sheet and wipe my mouth. I look at his decapitated body and smile. Now, I'm satisfied. My wife Chloe and I have been married for 3 years and in a relationship for 5. She has a 12-year-old son called Adam from a previous relationship. We try to act like we are one big happy family, but Adam still doesn't like me. His father has convinced him that I am the reason they split up, even though we met years after they broke up. Chloe has been the love of my life for the last few years, and I can honestly imagine spending the rest of my life with her. She grew up in a home with very overbearing parents who controlled everything about her life. Because of this, she has this hatred of people who interrupt her when she is talking. Her friend Emily was over for a visit, and they were in the living room having a conversation. I rushed into the room and tried to ask a question. Chloe immediately started scolding me and cut me off every time I tried to talk. She then spent a half-hour reprimanding me, while Emily sat there with a smirk on her face. Eventually, Chloe demanded to know what was so important that I needed to be so inconsiderate. I got them to follow me into the kitchen and heard Chloe's scream of anguish as she saw Adam's lifeless body. I calmly explained that he had been having an allergic reaction, and I had been trying to get his EpiPen from her. Jamie was a bad boy. Normal bad boys ride motorcycles, or get tattoos, or try to party harder than Motley Crue did in the 80s. I mean, Jamie did all that too, but it gets worse. When he was 16, Jamie had found a rare old grimoire and summoned something he couldn't banish. It was a dumb thing to do. Everyone knows you need to learn banishing and protective circles before you even think about learning how to summon. But he seemed like a sweet guy, so I let it slide. After a few months, he started acting weird. When it spiraled into gaslighting and abuse, I knew I had to get away. I'll never know who the real Jamie was. Was he a sweet guy whose resident demon influenced him to misbehave? Or was he just an asshole who happened to be permanently possessed? I waited until he went out of town to break it off. He didn't take it well, but since I moved and changed my number that same day, I wasn't worried. Breakups are hard, and I was lonely. So I petitioned Lilith for a genuinely sweet and loyal boy who would always love me. A couple of months later, my roommate Allie rescued a little stray tabby cat, and she had kittens. One of them was big for a kitten, purred like a motorcycle, and always wanted to play with me. I named him Harley. Who needs a boyfriend when you've got a cat who watches music videos with you, cuddles you to sleep every night, and is always happy to see you? Sure, Harley was destructive, loud, and had unusually coarse fur, but so what? I stopped looking for a new man. I didn't need one. The police showed up at our door one day. They said Jamie had broken into my old apartment and severely beaten the new tenant, looking for me. I declined protective custody because they didn't want me to bring Harley. I was coming home a few days later when Jamie boarded the same train car. He tried to grab me, but I escaped just before the door closed and the train pulled away. When Allie got home, we cast a protective circle, and there was a squad car outside, but I was still pretty frightened. Harley cuddled right up to me and purred until I fell asleep. I normally woke up to Harley purring right next to my ear. The next morning, Harley was instead sitting on the floor, washing his paws. Allie had the morning news on in the living room. The mangled body found by hikers in Griffith Park 2 hours ago is confirmed to be that of James Preston, wanted on multiple criminal charges. I slowly realized that Harley's white feet looked unusually pinkish, and there were faint reddish paw prints on the floor. I picked up Harley and gave him the biggest hug. He started purring. "Good boy, Harley. Good boy." The talk was nearly over, and audience members had started to exit the theater when Kirsten's lung popped out of her chest. She didn't immediately feel the cut in the chest, but the thin trickle of blood made her left breast itch. It should have served as an early warning. I'm sorry. She stood back from the podium and doubled over in obvious pain. An audible gasp came from the audience. She was able to get out and utter the words, "It's fine," before breaking into a coughing fit, resulting in a pool of blood on the stage. The audience was up from their seats and began rushing to the front of the theater. Flashbulbs popped. Kirsten dropped to her knees with a scream. Her left lung burst through the cut and tore through her chest. Her blouse kept the organ from flopping out onto the stage. The blood from the wound turned the cloth into a membrane holding the spasming organ and spilled out in a pool that made its way to the audience members crowded close. She grabbed the lung quickly and rolled over on top of it. The pain was excruciating, and even as security finally started pushing the crowd back, they could hear her sobs. Some even cut a blurry photo of her hunched over, pushing the lung back through the cut. The medics hired for the event kept their distance and formed a loose semicircle around her. She struggled with the organ, but finally flipped over on her back in the pool of blood and cleared her restored lungs with a final violent cough. Her agent rushed out onto the stage and covered her with a blanket. The medics had a gurney ready for her. As they lifted her, she coughed twice, expelling the last of the blood, and then gave the audience a victorious thumb in the air. The audience broke out in riotous applause. Her agent took the microphone to explain what had just happened to the unbelieving. As the medics took her away, she massaged the quickly healing cut with a painful wince. She was a month away from her 289th birthday, and there seemed to be a good chance that she might live forever if she could just keep her organs from escaping.
Please subscribe, or the toxic skull will come for you.